Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and in today's video I'm going to be bringing you my review for Days Gone. Now right off the bat, to let you know that this video is not coming from someone who played the game for 10 hours and decided to put it down because I didn't like playing as the character. No, this video is coming from someone who actually took the time to play through the entire game, including the post-game content. Yes, I did get that secret ending, if anyone was wondering. I took the time to go through all the side content, beat all the side storyline missions, all the optional content. I took out the hordes, I maxed out my character, got the platinum trophy, so I have played the game. All told, I should say, it probably took me between 60 to 70 hours, maybe even more, to go through all the content in the game because I didn't utilize the fast travel very much at all. I decided to play the game naturally and travel through the world as I believe it is meant to be played, because it is, in some ways, a survival game that it relies on resource management, and so I decided to play the game as such. Now, we're going to be discussing what's good, what's bad. There's a lot of both, so we're going to have to get right into it, and at the end I also have to discuss a pretty serious technical issue that I ran into. It is definitely serious enough where I have to talk about it in a review, because it is kind of a critical deal. Now, they did put out a patch today. I have not played it on the new patch, but it was specifically supposed to address the issue that I had, so I don't know if it's been fixed or not, but I'm definitely going to mention it here. Anyway, let's just get right into the review. So, Days Gone. So in this game, you play as Deacon St. John, and yes, right away, let me tell you, that is one of the worst video game protagonist names I have ever heard. In fact, it might be the top of my list for worst named protagonist, but that's really besides the point. The only problem is you're going to hear the name about 1,000 times throughout the entire game. This is a game that is post-apocalypse. You will be fighting against hordes of zombies that aren't really zombies. The storyline will call them freakers. They're basically infected humans. They're not technically dead, so they're not zombies, but you get the idea. They're basically zombies. There are different variants of them that you will run into the further you get into the game. Some of them are more powerful. Some of them have different abilities, such as ones that are called screamers that can scream and knock you off your bike. They can disorient you. And then there's big ones called breakers that take a lot of ammo to take down. They will rush you and just sort of pummel you into the ground. And of course, the thing that the game is most based upon with the marketing is the gigantic hordes of freakers that you will run into, and they will chase you around. There are several of them throughout the map. Now, the marketing for the game may have made you think that you're going to run into them all the time. You don't really run into them that often. However, if you go out hunting for them, you can run into them, and you can take them out any time throughout the game, and it can be quite a challenge depending on how well prepared you are and how well equipped you are. Now, one thing we need to discuss about this game that is very important is at the start of the game, it really does a very poor job with a lot of what it does, including character movement, the gunplay, riding around your vehicle, which in this game, obviously as a biker, you were riding around on a motorcycle the entire time. And the problem is this is a game where it introduces you to a lot of skills and a lot of different upgrades throughout the game that really are very significant, but as a result, when you start the game, you are very weak. You can't aim your weapons very well. You don't have much stamina, so you can't run very far. Your bike is terrible. So it's one of those games where they start you out so weak that it really kind of can be a drag to play at the start. So if this is a game that you maybe have picked up and you have put down, I can understand that if you didn't really like the first few hours of the game. I kind of felt the same way. The story kind of drags at the start. The camps that they introduce you to aren't really that important or relevant to the overall main story of the game. In fact, one of the problems with this game is the fact that they introduce you to sort of optional side quest areas and camps to do quests for at the very start, and you don't really actually get into the main story arc of the game until about a third of the way through the actual game, when you move into a new area and unlock a new camp. That's when the actual story starts. Now, this is a design decision that I do not think serves the game well at all, because the story that starts partway through the game is far more interesting than anything that happens at the beginning of the game. Now, at the start, they are trying to set you up with a friendship with your friend Boozer. I'm not going to go into too many spoilers, but the start of the game is supposed to be sort of a prologue that sets you on your journey with your biker friend from the past before the world got set aflame with the freaker outbreak. But I do think that this is a storyline that they could have sewn in better, and I think that they really made a big mistake by not introducing the third area first and had these other beginning areas sort of supplemental to the game. I think they could have just opened up the entire map, because this is also one of the games where it opens up the maps in segments and you don't even know it's there until partway through the game. It's like, oh, here's another huge area, and then again it expands into a fourth area, and then again later on, 2/3 of the way through a game, it expands again with another huge area. So there is really 5 or honestly 6 areas in the game. There's several different camps to unlock, and it really, I don't really know why that's a design decision they made. They did not need to do that to tell the story that they wanted to tell. They did not need to do that when it comes to the open world itself. The open world is much bigger than it needed to be. I think they could have told the story in a much more condensed map, and then I think if they had shuffled things around, they could have told the exact same story in a different order, and it would have been far more entertaining and interesting. Now, going back to the character progression, one of the issues with the game is, again, you start out so weak that he's not really fun to play with. The bike isn't very fun to ride around on. By the end of the game, however, you are much stronger. You have all sorts of different skills. Your character is much stronger when it comes to health. You can run for much longer to get away from enemies, and if you're getting chased by hordes, your bike also by the end of the game will be 1,000 times better than what you started with. It'll be so much more fun to play on a mechanical level. So if you talk to someone, or maybe you yourself only played 5 or 10 hours of the game, you didn't really get to see it at its peak when the character actually performs much better, when your bike performs better, and overall the game is more fun to play once you unlock skills, because this is not a game that has skill sets that are incremental. You're not going to be like plus 10% melee damage. No, it's going to be like, boom, double your melee damage, or here's double your ammo, or double your throwables. Everything is double every time you unlock one of the good skills. So it's that type of game. So it's both good and bad, because you can feel the progression throughout the game. You can feel yourself getting much stronger, but at the same time, it really does handicap the start of the game. Now, the basic mission structure for the game, it's sort of like a Rockstar game. You're going to have a few missions available to you at any given time. There'll be different icons on your map that will pop up. The people at the camps will contact you via a radio that you have, and that is how you will get the majority of your quests. They'll be like, hey, come to the camp, we got to talk to you, and you'll head out and talk to them. They will send you out on a quest. Sometimes you'll need to go and rescue someone from a camp. Sometimes you'll need to go and wipe out a group of marauders at another bandit camp. Basically, what you're going to be doing a lot of time is going out and raiding camps. The gameplay itself, when it comes to fighting the human enemies, is really one of the lowlights of the game, because the human enemies are not very dangerous at all. They don't have different classes. There's basically, you'll have a couple of snipers in any given camp, and if you take them out, the other enemies are really not going to be able to do too much to you. A lot of times they're just going to have melee weapons, and they'll just come charging at you in a group. It's kind of weird. They don't all have guns a lot of time. So what you'll be able to do, if you have guns and they don't, you can pretty much just take them all out as they charge at you with melee weapons. So overall, the AI when it comes to human NPCs is actually very, very poor. They are not posing much of a threat at all. It's the freakers and the zombie hordes and the more robust different variants on those that are really the true enemies in the game. Also, the animals in the game can be pretty dangerous. If you run into a bear or a pack of wolves, they can take you out much more quickly. The human enemies in the game are actually very, very just pretty much useless. I'll just come right out and say it. There's no good AI going on. Now, in an earlier video, I posited that there seemed to be a lot of mapping issues that I thought might have been causing the problems. Now, after a couple of patches, I noticed those issues pretty much went away. The AI was not stumbling over itself. It wasn't clipping into different areas it wasn't supposed to, but the AI really never got better. So I think this is just a question of they just didn't do a great job of tuning the AI. They don't notice you. It's one of those games where if you're crouched down 2 feet in front of them, as long as you're behind a wall, they won't see you. Sometimes you can pop up right in front of them and they just don't see you. It's really not very good when it comes to that. However, if you're going to take out a horde, or if you get surprised by a horde, or if you are trying to creep through some of the caves in the area and then you realize that, oh, I just stumbled across 100 enemies in this cave and now they're chasing me out. That is when the game truly shines, and that is when the combat and the survival really kicks into high gear, because a lot of times you're just going to have to run away, because if you have 100 of those things charging you all at once, good luck to you if you weren't prepared to take them out ahead of time. I spent a lot of the early parts of the game running away because I had limited resources, whether it be Molotovs or grenades or whatever, or whether I only had a limited amount of ammo. That is something that I would do, is I spent a lot of time running. So early on I did invest a lot of skill points in stamina because that is where I felt it was most needed. But again, running away from the hordes, killing the hordes eventually once you get better, well equipped, that is the highlight of the game when it comes to the combat. There is certainly no doubt about that. Far better than anything you're going to run into by clearing out the bandit camps. Honestly, this is one of the situations in the game where I think they may be needed a fresh set of eyes to come in and say, hey, this is a gameplay mechanic that is really pretty stale, and maybe you should trim this up. It's fine if you want to have some of this in the game, but again, with a map this size, you didn't need to fill it in with a bunch of pretty much repetitive side quests, because it really does take away from the rest of the game. Now, let's discuss the story without really discussing the story. I don't want to give away any of the storylines at all, but basically, I will say this. The story is a mixed bag. Some of it's really good, some of it's pretty bad. Some of it is pretty well written, there's some good twists and turns, and some of the stuff is foreshadowed with the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the kneecap. It is just, like I said, it's just a mixed bag. The same thing comes with the dialogue. Some of the dialogue is totally fine. Some of it's actually good. Some of it is some of the worst dialogue writing I've heard in a game in a very long time. Let me give you an example. Every time Deacon comes up to a bandit camp that he has to take out the enemies for, you will hear a line exactly like this or a variant of this line. Bunch of murderous sons of bitches. I'm gonna kill every last one of you. Who wrote that line? Who put pen to paper or finger to keyboard and typed that line out with a straight face? It's just, that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. Some of it is B-level, just cheese camp writing, and some of it is so bad, I don't know if it's supposed to be tongue-in-cheek, but it is. And then at other times, the writing seems totally fine. So I don't know if they had, maybe they had one or two good writers on the staff, and maybe a couple people that weren't so strong filling it in. Something else to keep in mind, the voice acting in the game is actually quite strong throughout. Most of the characters in the game have really good voice actors, and they deliver their lines quite well. However, it sounds like the voice director, whoever gave them the direction on the game, just did a terrible job of recognizing what scene goes with what group of dialogue. I'll give you an example. There's some missions where you will have a companion on the back of your bike. Deacon will yell as if he's getting blown in the face with wind, and it's all coming in and be like, hey, so where are you headed? And then the person on the back of the bike will answer him in a completely normal tone of voice, as if they're not on a bike, they're just sitting in a room having a cup of coffee. So that doesn't fall down to the problem with the voice actor. That is something where the director just did not give them the proper direction of what the context of the scene was, and there's a lot of issues like that. And I have to think that anyone playing through the game when they were quality testing must have noticed that. So it might be a question of they just didn't have time to go back and fix it, or they didn't have the budget to re-record some of the audio, or I don't know, maybe they did just not pick up on it. But there's a lot of that in the game where it seems like they spliced together different audio samples from really disparate conversations. Some of it just doesn't seem like it matches up. However, like I said, a lot of the storylines are actually pretty good. Some of them are kind of weak, some of them are actually kind of downright silly. But the main storyline and the overall overarching story with the mystery of where you're trying to figure out and maybe find your long lost wife, which is actually one of the core stories of the game, that storyline is actually done pretty well. Now, the missions associated with that are not necessarily all that good. A lot of them, to start with, are stealth-based missions that you can fail instantly if an enemy spots you, and there's no way you can take out enemies on the move, so you basically have to stay hidden the entire time. Those are by far the worst missions in the game. You may have heard about those already. They are as bad as advertised. They are not good missions at all. However, the settings of the missions and the stories and the information you can pick up during those missions are actually kind of interesting, so they're not a total loss, because the backstory and the lore of the world around you is actually pretty well done in the game. Now, when I mentioned the foreshadowing earlier, some of it is done so sloppily, it is really written quite poorly. There's a twist in the middle of the game that is foreshadowed so heavily that I thought, okay, they're really leaning into this. They can't possibly actually pull off this story. I thought they had to subvert my expectations here, but no, the thing that happens in the middle of the game, it's exactly what you see coming. So it's no shock at all. Again, it's an example of some of the writing is good, some of the writing is bad. It's really a mixed bag. Overall, though, I actually did enjoy the story. I liked the characters. I liked Deacon more than I thought I would. I thought I was really going to hate him. I actually don't mind him as a character, and I don't mind a lot of the ancillary characters in the game. Now, overall, I gotta say, the story is more than the sum of its parts. By the end of it, I did enjoy it. I liked where the story ended up. I liked most of the journey through it, even though there were some rough edges and some questionable dialogue. And sure, it kind of dragged on in a certain couple of sections. It didn't need to have all of the story that was in the game. But if they had trimmed it up a little bit, there is some good stuff in there, and I did enjoy it overall. So, can't really complain about the story at the end of the day. Now, real quick, let's just jump into the traversal of the game, which is, of course, going to be riding around on your trusty motorcycle. Now, the good thing about this is any upgrade you make is going to be a very positive upgrade. Like I mentioned earlier, most of the stuff in this game is not incremental. However, with the bike, it is going to be sort of a more incremental upgrade system. You're going to slowly expand the size of the gas tank, how far you can travel, how good your tires are. It affects your traction, how good you can turn around corners, and all that. You know, basic vehicle upgrades. However, it is very important, and by the end of the game, you will have a much better experience riding around the bike. It is a bit of a chore at the start of the game. I cannot deny that the bike is very weak. I think they should have made it a little bit stronger at the start so it didn't seem like such a slog to travel around all the time on the bike. However, by the end of the game, you're going to be zipping around. You're going to have nitrous boosters. The bike's top speed is going to be much faster. You're going to be able to turn corners much quicker. And you're going to have a much bigger gas tank so you can travel around for a much farther amount of time before you have to worry about filling up the gas tank, which is something you're going to have to do quite often. You're going to have to fill up the gas tank. You're going to have to make repairs on the bike with scrap you find out in the world if the bike gets damaged, which it will. If you get taken off by some wolves or if a sniper shoots you off, it will do serious damage to your bike, and you're going to have to find scrap out in the world to repair it. Now, you're also going to have to find scrap out in the world to repair stuff like your melee weapon, which is also a very important tool in this game. Bottom line is you're sometimes going to run out of bullets and you're going to have to rely on just using a melee weapon. So the scrap also goes into that. Now there is upgrades in the upgrade system where you can reduce the amount of scrap you need to do these repairs to your bike, or you're going to get more durable melee weapons so that by the end of the game, again, it's a question where by the end of the game you are just so much stronger and the game is just easier to play, both mechanically, physically, everything. The tools you have are much better. The guns you have, I mentioned all this before, but it is true. I cannot stress it enough. If you are struggling with the early hours of the game, stick with it because you will have a much better time by the end. I hope. I think. Now, overall, what do I think about the game? I actually enjoyed most of my time playing the game. There was not any time really where I was just cursing the game out or really having any major glaring issues. There's some frame rate problems in the final area that I definitely ran into. I know that was a problem earlier on. There was a lot more technical issues earlier on. There was some audio bugs. Those all went away. I didn't have any audio bugs after they did a couple patches. There was problems with some of the freakers disappearing here and there off the screen when they're not supposed to. That also got cleared up. But I told you I had a major technical issue that I needed to discuss, and that's what I need to talk about now. So, after I beat all the missions in the game, after I got the Platinum Trophy, what I like to do a lot of times, because in a single-player game, I got to make some room on the hard drive. So, I got the Platinum Trophy, and unless they come out with an expansion or a DLC later on, I know they're doing a higher difficulty mode next month, but that's not really necessarily going to draw me back in. If they have a bigger expansion later, maybe that would be the case. But what I went to do, I went to save it, do a manual save, and I was going to upload it to the cloud. Now, what happened is, when I went to save it after the game, it actually corrupted all my data, and my PS4 did a hard crash and did not turn back on for almost an hour. And when I did that, I had to rebuild the database a little bit, and I also had to rebuild my extended hard drive, which I don't like doing. I don't like having that sort of automatic shut off with the extended hard drive. I turned the system back on, shut it down, let it sit overnight. The next day I came back, I tried to fire up the game again. I looked and said that I had corrupted the save. So I tried to use another one of the saves that I had, tried to manually save again, and the system crashed again and totally shut down my PS4. So this happened twice in a row. Now, the question at this point is this an issue with my PS4 or with the game? So what I did was I deleted the game off of my hard drive, and I tested out the save system with various other games, both Sony and third-party games. And it turns out, it looks like it was Days Gone that was the problem. I have not replicated the problem since then with other games. I have downloaded and installed updates and new games since then. So I think this was an issue with Days Gone itself. So that is a very serious issue if the game is corrupting its own data and shutting your system down. So I think that it's only fair that I bring this up. Now, like I said, they did have a patch today, the 1.08 patch, which is supposed to address crashing issues specifically. So this might be fixed by now, but I'm bringing it to your attention. It's only fair. Now, overall, one of the key issues with the game is that it just kind of feels like the game was something that should have come out 5 years ago. A lot of the systems in the game, a lot of the HUD elements in the game, it just kind of feels like stuff that the industry has moved away from in the last 2 or 3 years, and something that they've really streamlined a lot of these systems. You can tell that this game has been in development for a very long time. That also goes for the fact that the game is a straight clone of Sons of Anarchy and The Walking Dead, which are also series that are pretty old. But a lot of the game designs, the fact that you're going around, and some of it is very Ubisoft-ish, where you're going around, you clear out a camp, you go down and you unlock part of the map. It'll mark certain stuff on your map, and some of the conventions and design decisions in the game certainly feel outdated. I think this is a game that if they had a second crack at it, they can do a much better job. Do some better editing, hire a couple better writers to help the team. That would probably help. But I do think there's a lot of good stuff here. The physics of the game are good. The way the bike handles at the end is good. I think, like I said, I think there's something here. I think this is a franchise that you could see a huge improvement in the sequel. This is coming from a studio that doesn't have a lot of experience in the last few years of making these big games. They worked on a lot of smaller games for the Vita over the last decade, so this was really a game that they didn't have a ton of experience with, these giant open world games. So I think this is a pretty good crack at the studio for a first game. Overall, I did enjoy the game. I can't deny it. Despite the rough edges, despite the flaws, I know some of the stuff I said, I sounded pretty harsh, but overall, as I mentioned earlier, I think as with the story, the game overall is better than the sum of its parts. I think this is actually a pretty quality title, and I think that you might enjoy it. If anything about this sort of genre interests you, whether it be zombies or if you just like open world games, this isn't really a collectathon. There are some collectibles in the game, but this is certainly not a collectathon game. It's not that type of game. It's a game about leveling up your character, going out doing quests. It's very narrative driven, and overall, I think it's a pretty good experience. Anyway, that's it from me, Coach Toolshed. That's my review for Days Gone. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.